Hey everybody, I'm Gary Palmer Jr., you're you, and together we are minting coins. So in the course of this show, we have a lot to talk about. There's so much news every day. We can't possibly touch upon everything, but I really want to practice getting more information into the show, maybe with slightly less depth, but I really want to make sure that we always touch upon the points that are really important. There might just be one or two lines buried inside these articles that are the most important takeaways, and beyond that, the headlines usually don't tell the whole story. So there's going to be a lot that we're talking about, from realizations to dollarization. We're going to be talking about Zcash and Monero. We're going to be talking about Goldman Sachs to Coinbase and so much more in between, including information coming out of the European central banks and the Europol, which is the European law enforcement agency. You might have recognized their name from such movies as every movie that takes place in Europe, perhaps. But, with that being said, let's just jump right into the show. And jumping into the show, I just wanted to say a quick shout out to Colin Adam over at How to Create for your donation of half a Litecoin. It's our first Litecoin donation. Super appreciate it. Huge shout out. Thank you very, very much. Every little bit helps this show in the long term. It helps in motivation. Like this video, comment on these videos, be part of the community. The reason that we're here, the reason that we're creating these videos is to really make a connection with you and to share this information with you and with all the people that you know, simply because we feel as if there's so much information, important information, that's not being presented in a way that is giving you the points that are most important, that are helping you not just see dots appear inside these headlines, but to be able to connect these dots and to be able to put all these pieces together. So thank you very much, Colin, for the Litecoin donation, and thank you very much for the two recent Bitcoin donations that we've had as well, totaling 0.103 Bitcoin. So it's just awesome. You are beautiful people. Even if you don't donate, you're an awesome, beautiful person just by existing in the world and by having an effect in this world. And sometimes it seems as if the things that I do don't matter. It seems as if the actions that I take don't really have an effect in the world. But I realize that I say things, people will listen to me. People, even if someone just hears a couple of words, if you are seen, if you're heard, if you show up, then you are having an influence. And so just by showing up, just by listening to this video, just by hitting the like button or the down button, that's having a direct butterfly effect with not just the world and the metaphysics of it all, but, in some aspects it has an effect on the computer algorithms, which are just, coming from someone that studies algorithms. The algorithms most of the time are just trying to replicate what humans do. And so if you understand a computer algorithm really well, not to, get too deep down this rabbit hole, but it's essentially being an awesome human being. So, with like Google, for example, and SEO and getting your website found, if you are presenting information in an open, accurate, transparent way where you're trying to make an honest connection with your audience, then that authenticity is going to translate to the Google algorithms much more than trying to make all your decisions based on what the code says. And so, I know that's a huge tangent and I digress, but, thanks for showing up and thanks for being here. So turning into the market, we're over here at coinmarketcap.com. We're living in a world with over 1,150 different cryptocurrencies, and we are at a market capitalization of $144.5 billion. It's a significant amount of money in the market. We're still not past that $150 billion mark as we were before. And it'll be really exciting when we do get past that mark. We're going to hear about it in the headlines when we cross that threshold. 24-hour trading volume relatively down, $2.7 billion. We've been seeing this well above $4 billion the past couple of days, around $3 and $4 billion, more exact. And here we are under $3 billion at $2.7 billion. Our Bitcoin dominance is still relatively pretty high considering where we've been over the course of 2017, with this Bitcoin dominance currently 49.3%. The per Bitcoin price, we have our total market capitalization, $71 billion, $71.2 billion to be more precise, with a per Bitcoin price $4,291. Looking down the line, everything is pretty much red. In the top 10 and looking in the top 20, we have Lisk up, almost 1%. Tether, is tethered. The basic attention token, the BAT token, is up 5.5% per the USD value. MadeSafe is up. Pivx up almost 16%. Singular DTV up a huge 78.45%. So very interesting to see all the red across the board. And just keep in mind and be looking at these prices in terms of the Bitcoin price, because when you look at it in terms of the Bitcoin price, the Ethereum is actually up 2.49%. So when you're looking at the Ethereum price over in terms of the dollars, yes, it's down 0.17%, but when you're looking at it in terms of the Bitcoin price per Ether, the Ethereum price is actually up in the past 24 hours from this data 2.49%. Yeah, and so when you probably look at the Pivx token and the singular DTV token, that pushes Pivx 18.75% in the past 24 hours in terms of the BTC price, and singular DTV 83%. So those are the big winners of the day. Essentially, long story short, when you're looking at these prices, you want your percentage price that your altcoin goes down. So in this case, Ethereum, you want your altcoin to go down. If it's going to go down in USD, you want to be down less than the Bitcoin price is down in the USD. So if the Bitcoin price is down in 2.43%. Anything on this list that's less than 2.43% is going to be a winner because it would have been up in terms of the Bitcoin price. Now, if it's in the green in Bitcoin price and it's green in USD price, then that's great. But long term, you really can't be living in two worlds. You have to have a goal of either increasing your Bitcoin portfolio, or you have to have a goal of increasing your USD, because in some ways, Bitcoin and USD are diametrically opposed to each other. It's sort of like, what is it sort of like? It's sort of like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You can't have, if you're in a stadium, you can't have Coca-Cola have 100% of the stadium and Pepsi have 100% of the stadium, right? It's either one or the other has 100%, or they share it straight down the middle. And in the world of competition, these things usually don't slice straight down the middle. And I think we understand the dynamics of the limitations of Bitcoin. There are only being 16.6 million of these right now. And as we saw in yesterday's video, the amount of new Bitcoin generated in the world, or I'm sorry, in yesterday's video, the amount of new fiat that's going to be generated in 2018 US budget of USD is going to be an additional $1.5 trillion in spending. So very interesting. And turning into today's news, first off, we have this petition that's being requested of Coinbase to clarify their plans for the Segwit2x. And so we have the hard fork for Bitcoin coming up, the Bitcoin hard fork, the 2x part. So now that we have Segwit activated, Bitcoin Cash does not have Segwit. Bitcoin BTC does have Segwit, but Bitcoin is going to about to hard fork between the Bitcoin Core, which is the Bitcoin in its current incarnation at the 1 megabyte block size level. But the 2x part of this hard fork, this new coin that might get created, this Bitcoin 2x, or whatever they're going to call it, nobody knows, because there's so much confusion and fear and uncertainty and doubt that's happening around this. This other Bitcoin is going to be 2 megabytes. Simply, it's going to be a bigger block size, and there's going to be a divergence of the code because there will be completely different coins, and then they'll have to be maintained separately. It's a huge fiasco. And so Coinbase signed on to the New York agreement. And we have this petition here at change.org. Actually, let me refresh this page because this was earlier that I loaded it. So yeah, we are now between the 1 and 200 number of people signing this petition. So they're simply asking, the petition is simply asking for Coinbase to clarify how they plan to handle the upcoming Segwit2x hard fork. For example, how are they planning to use the funds of all this new coin that they're going to have from all their holdings, from all the Bitcoin they hold? What are the ticker symbols going to be? And are we going to have the same sort of confusion like we have with Bitcoin Cash, with the confusion of BCC and BCH, because there's different exchanges that are using those tickers, because there's already someone using BCC. Which Bitcoin is going to be the true Bitcoin? Will people have access to their Bitcoin on both different chains? Is Coinbase going to choose one or the other? What's the criteria that Coinbase is going to use to determine and honor the primary Bitcoin moving forward? This is a major concern for the powers of the world, but this is more of a concern for the individual users of Bitcoin who care about Bitcoin and recognize that Coinbase is simply a business that's operating inside the market. And Coinbase has a potential to influence the market, to direct that market unfairly, unilaterally with the other players inside the New York agreement. And users recognize that this is creating a lot of fear inside the community. This is creating a ton of uncertainty. And most of all, this is creating a lot of doubt about not just Bitcoin itself, but the people who are sure about Bitcoin. Is creating a lot of doubt about the future and the potential of what's going to happen and where it's going to go, simply because there are people who are making decisions unilaterally for their stake, for their companies. And that's going to just, upset people in the community. And when I say upset, cause confusion, so that just people aren't on the same page, creates a lot of wasted time and energy having to re-educate people, which is the right Bitcoin, why is Coinbase doing something different? And so to prevent that situation, to prevent those roadblocks and those hiccups, which are going to hinder the acceleration of the price of Bitcoin, hinder the acceleration of the Bitcoin blockchain, and hinder the decentralization of the open source world. And so people want to prevent that. And so they want Coinbase to respond to this petition, using this petition ahead of time, before this hard fork in November. So feel free to check out this petition. If you want answers from Coinbase, then maybe this is something that you want to fill out, sign, share, and show other people in your community about this petition. So in the Wall Street Journal front page, probably would have been bigger on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, but if you happen to see the Wall Street Journal, then the front page got taken over by other news. But nevertheless, on the Wall Street Journal homepage, it is talking to the world, the mainstream financial world, the mainstream business world, the mainstream world that knows what JP Morgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, said about Bitcoin, Bitcoin being a fraud, Bitcoin being a Ponzi scheme. What the Wall Street Journal is now telling their mainstream financial and business subscribers across the world is that Goldman Sachs is planning to directly invest, to get directly involved into Bitcoin trading. And so we all know, who the people who watch this channel, that there's several other firms that already have investment products for Bitcoin, such as Grayscale's GBTC, and other opportunities out there as well across the world. But Goldman Sachs here would open up a whole new marketplace for investors, mainly because of their position inside of the world financial system and their ability to just do more and have more power with their licenses and with their inside navigation of the red tape and everything that you have to do to be a bank, a major bank in the world and the United States. And so Goldman is saying that this is in response to the client interests in digital currencies, and that they're simply exploring how to best serve them in their space. And you know, this is really important what we're about to talk about right now, because in a lot of the articles that I read, and probably a lot of the articles that you read, you might hear that one of the major issues about Bitcoin is the volatility. We hear that Bitcoin is risky, Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme because there's so much volatility in Bitcoin, and that all this volatility equals all of this risk, right? Do you ever hear that? I hear that all the time. Volatility is bad because it creates these huge swings and the ups and downs, and creates, you know, an insecure market, right? Well, check this out. Here, what this is going in to say is that Goldman Sachs and a lot of these hedge fund managers and financial managers, they really seek volatility. They really want volatility. They want the lots of capital, lots of market capitalization, with money being spent in both directions, up and down. Because when there's these huge spikes and these huge waves in the volatility, that's what creates the opportunity for investors to make huge amounts of profits, because essentially that's what makes a market, right? The going up and the going down, and then making those wins in between very quickly on large market caps. That's how these guys do it. Billions and billions and trillions of dollars. And let's not even get into the derivatives and the amount of debt that exists in the world with the amount of derivatives in the world. So next time you see that volatility is bad, just realize that maybe they tell the common person that volatility is bad, but the bankers and the investment bankers and the hedge fund managers really seem to crave the volatility. And so whether or not this is good for mainstream investors and mainstream adoption of Bitcoin remains to be seen. In some ways, this is really, really good because it's definitely going to add market capitalization to the Bitcoin market. But at the same time, yeah, this gives these guys additional ways to buy Bitcoin in terms of the past price, the future price, the current price. And, you know, I'm sure they're going to try to figure out ways to do fractional reserve Bitcoin lending, or fractional reserve, you know, Bitcoin trading. You know, I guess they already have that when you do like 100x and stuff like that. But wow, you know, that's beyond me. If you're brave enough to get into that, then you know, but that's a huge risk. But that's what these guys love. They love the risk. And so this was really interesting that someone just, you know, said this, and I put this in here because I wanted to, you know, make sure I didn't forget, because it is important to point out that by the time an organization like Goldman Sachs announces something like this, that they've already been in it for a long time. And not to mention that they're heavily invested, at least it's highly, well, they're definitely heavily invested in Circle, but then it's highly likely that they are heavily invested into Bitcoin personally, that they've already purchased their, you know, their 10 Bitcoin or their 15 Bitcoin or their 21 Bitcoin, or maybe, you know, maybe they purchased a 100 Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's just, you know, they probably already have their position, knowing that Bitcoin is limited, knowing that all of the funds that follow is only going to increase to all the people who are already holding Bitcoin. So, yeah, the more and more you see this in the mainstream media, the more and more that the investment bankers have already purchased their 1 Bitcoin, the more and more the news anchors have already purchased their 1 Bitcoin, the more that, you know, the camera operator has already purchased their 1 Bitcoin before, you know, everyone gets to see it on, you know, Wolf Blitzer or CNN or the 6 o'clock news. So, you know, there's going to be the fear of missing out. There's an extremely disproportionate, I mean, there's probably like, you know, 5 or 10 million addresses, you know, 10 million. I mean, I could look it up, but there's just, you know, let's say 20 million addresses that have any amount of Bitcoin. And there's billions of people in this world. There's hundreds of millions of people in America. There's people all over the world that have Bitcoin, that, you know, these addresses are, you know, held by people all across the world, these, you know, 10 or 20 million Bitcoin addresses. But with just 300 million people in America, it's an extreme small amount of people who have already purchased into Bitcoin. So once Bitcoin does start to rise again, and it passes 5,000, and it passes 10,000, and it passes 15,000, and it crashes all the way down to 9,000, people are going to have the fear of missing out. People are going to be jumping into Bitcoin because, you know, the way that I look at it, the best way of predicting the future behavior is by looking at the past behavior. And this is a recycling cycle that has proven itself to repeat over and over again. And the situation with this cycle is that it has fewer variables for the market to manipulate. So they can't just, you know, buy more and sell more. The amount of Bitcoin that there is what it is, you know, as opposed to something like gold, where they were able to flood the market with all of this, you know, paper that says, I'm a piece of gold, when in fact it's just a piece of paper that says it's a piece of gold, but everyone knows that it's not a piece of gold. And so that's additional gold in the market that's not really gold, that increases the supply. You know, I mean, that's just my understanding of it, you know, for myself, because I don't understand it really well, and I'll admit that. But I do know there's these pieces of paper that say they're pieces of gold, and they don't have that for Bitcoin yet. And if they did, someone that really understands Bitcoin, I don't think would accept it. So speaking of people who accept Bitcoin, we have Ross Ulbricht here, who dropped his claims to the millions of dollars raised in the Silk Road Bitcoin auction. I just imagine this guy in a federal maximum security prison, and you know, just I don't know what his spirits are, but you know, just dropping his claim. You know, maybe he doesn't have the time or the money or the spirit or the resources to fight, you know, for this anymore. So he dropped his claim. And so what happened is that this was the guy from Silk Road who was running Silk Road, and you know, basically he wasn't licensed to run this business of this trading platform and using the Bitcoin. There's lots of charges that he got hit with. You can check this out a little bit in the movie Banking on Bitcoin. And then you can look this up on Wikipedia as well. This is a horrible story. It sucks that this person is in jail forever, and this person should not be in jail forever, if you ask me. Please look up this person's story more and see what's going on here. But what happened is that the U.S. government confiscated Ross's Bitcoin and then auctioned off his Bitcoin in 2014. And so they auctioned off his Bitcoin, which was over 30,000 Bitcoin. It was bought by the Silicon Valley investor, startup investor, Tim Draper, and then Tim Draper later bought another 2,000 Bitcoin. So at the time that this was sold for $48 million. But you know how much this is right now, right? And before I tell you how much this is right now, so this $48 million is going to count toward the $180 million that Ross owes. So in addition to everything else and his whole life being taken away and his freedom being taken away, and what else? And all of his wealth being confiscated and the lives of him and his family being turned upside down, he also owes $180 million. But, you know, that's okay, because for the $48 million that the government took from him, that they received from the sale of his 30,000 Bitcoins, is going to count toward the $180 million. So now he only owes $132 million. Yeah, so this 30,000 Bitcoin in today's terms, I'm pretty sure is worth about 600 million, if I had it right. I think it's worth about $600 million. And let's go check it out real quick. See if it pops up quick. All right, yeah, because that's just times 3, right? So what did I say? It's like 43. I say $4,300. So 100,000 million. Oh, it is only 130 million. What was our Bitcoin price earlier here? Yeah, 43. Ross article. 100,000 million, 130 million. So where are we? Yeah, so it would have paid almost all of his 180 million in monetary damage. So the government sold it too soon. Tim Draper made a killing, and that's part of that situation of what's happening. So definitely look into Ross's story a little bit more. It's definitely a story that I recommend everyone look into who learns about Bitcoin and blockchain technology and the history and the sacrifices that early adopters make, especially when the world is run in a centralized way where only certain people get to make the rules and profit in a situation. So speaking of centralization where only certain people get to make the rules and profit from the situation. We have this Boston Federal Reserve vice president that's letting people know, he's not really happy about saying this, but letting people know that blockchain is going to wake up the middlemen of the financial industries, like SWIFT and other places. And he's really asking, what is the future of SWIFT? So this is Jim Cunha, Senior Vice President of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And what are some things that he has said here? He said that any incumbent, that's a middleman, which is, the Federal Reserve is, stock exchanges are, SWIFT is, the clearinghouse is. I wouldn't say that the fintech are going to put us out of business necessarily. What they will do is wake us up, in some cases, be a little more innovative with our systems in a way that's positive. And so he's not saying that the banks are going to go out of business, but he's saying that the fintech companies are definitely going to, give them a rude awakening. And so it just goes on, Cunha goes on to say that the ongoing work inside the Federal Reserve of the United States is to educate monetary policymakers, payment experts, and regulatory specialists on the risks and potential of blockchain technology. So it might just be me, but that seems to be a pretty ominous sort of statement that their ongoing work is, to educate people, to educate these people who are policymakers and experts and regulatory specialists on the risks and the potentials. And, I guess we've just seen this all before with what the risks are, that, the privacy is a risk, and the decentralization is a risk, is what they say about Bitcoin. And the potential is that they can create their own Bitcoin that they control the inflation rate, that they control the privacy, that they can see every single transaction that ever happens, except they're not going to like that when they make their transactions that they don't want, the rest of the world to see. So it's definitely really interesting to see what's coming out there, and it's definitely really interesting to recognize that what they're looking to do is really build these partnerships with the policymakers, build these partnerships with the regulators, build these partnerships with the experts, and then to also build these partnerships with the fintech companies that are going to be more innovative, so that the financial banks, just like how JP Morgan Chase purchased the patents of Nikola Tesla and prevented, free worldwide energy from existing throughout the world potentially, so that they could keep coal burning and those sort of fossil fuels. The banks are now looking to make sure that they gobble up all this financial technology, and then to really incorporate it to really give them an edge, which otherwise they won't have that positive edge. And so this is extending not just throughout America, but this is also extending through the European central banks as well. And so the researchers at the European central banks, the European Central Bank, otherwise known as the ECB, they published a new research report talking about the impact of the distributed ledger technology, abbreviated DLT. And so distributed ledger technology is a lot like blockchain technology, but it's a different way of talking about it. Distributed ledger technology, you could say, is not necessarily as decentralized as blockchain technology, which is really, very centralized. Blockchain technology, by design, you want as decentralized as possible to prevent a 51% attack. So the more centralized it is, really the less of a blockchain technology it becomes and the more of a distributed ledger technology it is. That's at least my take on it. If you have a difference of opinion, feel free to pop that in the comments below. So anyway, the report, I guess most notably, according to this article at Coindesk.com, goes on to say that if the distributed ledger technology and non-distributed ledger solutions are to coexist, then interoperability between the two approaches needs to be ensured. So there needs to be a way to provide ad hoc matching fields where a participant holds both distributed ledger technology and non-distributed ledger technology account. And so simply what they're saying there from the European Central Bank is that there needs to be an anchor point, there needs to be a way to instantly transfer between the cryptocurrency or the digital token and the traditional system, which I guess you could say is just a database or somehow an entry in a ledger that is centralized and is the exact opposite of distributed, the exact opposite of decentralized. And so that's just their report putting it out there that, hey, they need to build partnerships. They need to work with this technology, and they need to, if they're going to be successful, they need to make sure that this technology is going to allow this interoperability between their systems and the new systems that are being developed. So we're seeing a reoccurring theme here, moving in this different direction. Moving in this direction of acceptance, of working together, of partnering, so these companies don't get left behind. And this isn't just with the banks, this isn't just with the banks all across the world, but we're also seeing this come out of Europol. And so we've seen information from the Department of Homeland Security, we've seen information from the IRS and the FBI, and no one likes Bitcoin, no one likes this blockchain technology. And what we're seeing here is that Europol is warning Zcash, Monero, and Ether, and how those are playing, apparently they're saying, a growing role in cybercrime. And so Europol is the European Union Law Enforcement Agency, as you've seen in lots of different crime movies throughout your life, and action adventure type movies. This new 2017 Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment Report, otherwise known as a 2017 IOCTA, Europol is stating that although Bitcoin is still the preferred currency in cybercrime, the landscape is beginning to evolve with Monero, Ethereum, Zcash, which are gaining popularity in the digital underground. And so this is very, very funny, all right? And so this made me laugh out loud in my head. This is what they're saying about Monero and Zcash. So they're saying transactions cannot be attributed to any particular user or address. All coins used in a transaction are hidden by default, and transaction histories are kept private. Oh no, that's not the part that made me laugh out loud. So that's the part that said, yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. All Bitcoin transactions should be private by default. Privacy should be private by default, because that's what privacy is. And so they're saying that the Monero and the Zcash, and I don't know about so much the Ethereum, but I guess in some ways the Ethereum also are private, and that's a default. It's like, and so I'm thinking, yes, of course, that's the case. Don't they understand this? And so the document goes on to say that, and this is the part that made me laugh out loud, Zcash has yet to feature any reported law enforcement investigations. So Zcash has yet to feature in any reported law enforcement investigations. So however, due to its privacy features, which involves obscuring both transaction recipient and transaction amount, the darknet marketplaces are interested in the cryptocurrency. And so, yeah, it just made me laugh out loud, because Zcash is not going to have a feature, to any reported law enforcement investigations, any of its information. I mean, it's by point private, and if it was to somehow have that ability for the law enforcement investigations and people were to know about that, well, then I think that would really take away from the market capitalization and what it is that makes Zcash special, because that's it. That's the only reason why Zcash is special, is that it can guarantee privacy in a way that is new and unique. And even with Zcash, as we saw in yesterday's video, even Zcash comes with huge risk for the world in terms of its master keys, and if we know if Zcash's master keys were actually destroyed or not. Yeah, and so this article just goes on to say, and how they just seized all this asset, all this coin, and they can't figure out how much Monero that there necessarily was, or that they necessarily received, because these transactions are obfuscated. And this is just more interest from more organizations across the world. And last but not least, speaking of organizations across the world, we have the IMF, and this is Christine Lagarde, and she sees cryptocurrencies being used as potential for the Dollarization 2.0. And so just recently, on the 29th of September, a couple days ago, they were at they were at a conference, and she was giving a speech, and she was talking about how she sees that the IMF foresees cryptocurrencies, including their potential for fulfilling the Dollarization 2.0, meaning that currencies such as Bitcoin could replace traditional dollar usages in countries that are facing issues of hyperinflation. Countries, for example, like Venezuela, as we know, are experiencing extreme levels of hyperinflation. And so during her speech, she said that, for instance, think of countries with weak institutions and unstable national currencies. Instead of adopting a currency of another country, such as the United States dollar, which, that's what we see over and over again, that for some reason there's problems in parts of the world, and then those problems lead to issues with the banks and the governments, and there's huge problems and hyperinflation, and to get things under control, then those countries will then adopt the US dollar in their countries. And so anyway, instead of adopting the US dollar, some of these economies might see a growing use of virtual currencies, call it Dollarization 2.0, which is essentially not saying a good thing about the dollar. Just like Gold 2.0 isn't saying a good thing about gold. Gold 2.0 is saying we're going to replace gold with Bitcoin. And Dollarization 2.0 isn't saying, hey, we're going to make the dollar a Bitcoin. It's saying, no, we're going to replace the dollar with a Bitcoin. And so, she might be saying this. In some ways, people might be excited about this. But if you think about her audience of international monetary experts, international banking institutions, her audience is probably seeing that and hearing that as a threat to how they currently do business. Because these new countries, if they don't use a dollar, if they instead turn to Bitcoin, then that's going to be something they don't control. And so all of the issues that they do have with blockchain technology, they go on to say that many of these technology challenges could be addressed over time. The issues with Bitcoin not being able to be successful. And so she's stating to her audience who's pro-dollar and essentially anti-Bitcoin that she's saying, I think it may not be wise to dismiss the virtual currency. And she's recognizing that Bitcoin could give the dollar a run for its money, especially in a situation where there's issues with the dollar, where there's issues on a global scale, and that could be a situation that we're headed for in the future. That could be something that they're aware of as financial experts, and that's something that they want to bring attention to, not just for the developing nations of the world, but for the world powers and those who are most in charge and have the most to lose, for people to exit whatever their fiat is, let it be yuans or rupees or rubles or dollars, and then to exit those traditional old world order fiat currencies, and then into the digital age, into the Bitcoin, and then into this world where this market capitalization starts to exceed not just $150 billion, not just $200 billion, but $1 trillion. And then by that point, the whole world is going to be taking notice, and businesses will really be ramping up. Things will really be taking off. Normal people will start to see the application of Bitcoin and blockchain technology in their lives as, the tokenization of our society begins to ramp up, which will coincide with the top tier coins increasing in value, the cream of the crop, as a lot of these, over 1,150 altcoins, start to in some ways fade and new ones come on the scene. It's going to be really, really interesting. So with that being said, I'm glad that we're checking this out together. I really appreciate you hanging out with me during this time and going through this information. I know this is a long video. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and this is in addition to everything else that I'm doing with my life, with my full-time gig and being a father of 5 children and just everything that is demanding of me in this world, and my time and my mind. And so it's curating all this information and going through all this information and doing it alone is very, very difficult. You know, the way that we succeed is by succeeding together. The way that we win is by winning together. And ultimately, even though some of us are islands and some of us are, you know, very alone in this world, either by design or not by design, ultimately as a species, it's my personal belief that we need to come together and we need to join together. And anything in your life that's division, anything that you see on the news that's causing the separation of people is more than likely 99.9% chance seeking to distract you or to take away your attention for what's really, really important in this world. Anything that brings us together, anything that connects us together, anything that grows and builds is positive and is likely positive for your life. But anything that's subtracting, anything that's dividing, anything that's you know, causing fear or uncertainty or doubt between people of the world or people of a particular country is probably something that is seeking to take away your attention, to take away your value of your community. Because ultimately, we all need to grow together. Ultimately, we all want a piece of this new world and this new technology. And so, yeah, if we're gonna make it, we're gonna make it together. And I'm really glad that we're together. I'm really glad that you know, we're checking out minting coins, and then we're learning about, you know, getting coins and holding coins and earning coins. And I'm glad that we're learning about ourselves minting coins. And I'm glad that together we're minting coins. Thanks for showing up. Like this video, comment below, check us out on SteemIt with the show notes. And I'm glad that together we're minting coins.